What does a military victory truly mean if families are still afraid to return home, if fields remain empty, and if village markets stay silent? For years, large parts of Burkina Faso were trapped in a brutal cycle. Armed violence pushed farmers from their land. Roads became dangerous. Livestock disappeared. Communities that had fed themselves for generations were forced to depend on emergency aid. A flag could be raised over a liberated village, but without people, crops, water, and work, that victory remained incomplete. Under Captain Ibrahim Traore, the struggle for security began to take on a larger meaning. The goal was not only to recover territory, it was to restore life to that territory. A village could not be considered truly reclaimed until families returned, wells functioned again, fields were planted, and children could see a future where their parents once saw only fear. That is where Burkina Faso's military campaign began to connect with a much wider national project. Security and agriculture were no longer treated as separate concerns. They became two parts of the same strategy. Soldiers opened space. Communities returned. Farmers restarted production. The state introduced seeds, fertilizer, machinery, irrigation, livestock support, and new efforts to expand rice, wheat, fishing, and food processing. This was more than a farming program. It was an attempt to reduce dependence on imported food, create work for young people, rebuild local markets, and make recovered territory economically alive. In other words, the battlefield victory was meant to become a victory at the dinner table. If you care about how African nations are trying to reclaim control over their land, resources, and future, follow this channel as we continue examining the changes reshaping the continent. In this story, we will look at how security gains opened the way for displaced families to return, how abandoned farmland was brought back into use, and how Ibrahim Traore's government tried to turn military progress into long-term food sovereignty. Because the final measure of victory is not only how much land a nation controls, it is whether the people can live on that land, work it, harvest from it, and feed their families with dignity. For millions of people living in Burkina Faso, the conflict was never measured only by the number of attacks or the territory that changed hands. It was measured by silent fields, abandoned villages, empty grain stores, and families forced to leave behind everything they had built over generations. Every road that became too dangerous to travel meant fewer crops reaching local markets. Every farming season lost meant another year of uncertainty for communities that depended almost entirely on agriculture to survive. In many rural areas, the greatest casualty of insecurity was not simply infrastructure. It was confidence. Farmers who once rose before sunrise to cultivate their land no longer knew whether they would return home safely at the end of the day. Livestock could not be moved freely. Irrigation systems were neglected. Weekly markets disappeared as traders avoided dangerous routes. What had once been productive farming communities slowly became places of displacement and economic paralysis. This reality explains why the security crisis affected far more than the military balance. Agriculture remains the backbone of Burkina Faso's economy, supporting the livelihoods of millions of people. When insecurity interrupted farming, it also disrupted family incomes, local businesses, food supplies, and the social fabric that had held villages together for decades. Every abandoned field represented lost harvests, fewer jobs, and growing dependence on humanitarian assistance. For displaced families, returning home was not simply a matter of crossing back into their villages. Their homes often required rebuilding. Their tools had been lost or destroyed. Fields had become overgrown after years without cultivation. Wells and irrigation channels needed repair. Schools and health centers had to reopen before communities could truly begin rebuilding their lives. This is why restoring security became the first essential step toward national recovery. Without safe roads, farmers could not transport their harvest. Without protected villages, planting new crops carried enormous risks. Without stability, government investment in agriculture would have little chance of producing lasting results. The challenge facing Burkina Faso was therefore much larger than winning military engagements. The real objective was creating conditions where families could once again live from the land they had cultivated for generations. Only then could reclaimed territory become more than a military achievement. It could become the foundation for economic recovery, food production, and the gradual restoration of hope across rural communities. Military victories can change the course of a conflict, but they do not automatically rebuild a nation. A town may be declared secure, yet true recovery begins only when families feel confident enough to return home and rebuild the lives they were forced to leave behind. For Burkina Faso, this became the next challenge after expanding security operations in several parts of the country. Many displaced families returned to villages that looked very different from the ones they had remembered. Houses needed repairs, wells required cleaning, and farmland had been left uncultivated for several growing seasons. Weeds covered once productive fields, irrigation channels had fallen into disrepair, and many farming tools had been lost or damaged. Returning home was therefore not the end of the journey, but the beginning of rebuilding an entire community. As more villages gradually became safer, daily life slowly started to return. Farmers cleared abandoned land and prepared it for planting. Local traders reopened small businesses. Weekly markets began attracting buyers and sellers again, allowing agricultural products to move between rural communities. Schools welcomed children back into classrooms, while health centers resumed serving nearby families. Each of these changes reinforced the others, creating momentum that extended beyond security alone. For Ibrahim Traore's administration, this process illustrated an important principle. Holding territory was only the first step. The greater objective was ensuring that recovered areas could once again support productive economic activity. A village without farmers could not contribute to national recovery, no matter how successful a military operation had been. By contrast, every family that resumed farming strengthened local food production, revived the rural economy, and helped restore confidence in the future. This connection between security and agriculture became central to Burkina Faso's broader national strategy. Stable communities create opportunities for investment, while productive farms generate income, employment, and food for local markets. As agricultural activity expanded, dependence on emergency assistance could gradually decline, allowing communities to rebuild with greater dignity and self-reliance. With more families returning to their land, the government's attention shifted toward an equally important question. How could these farmers receive the seeds, equipment, irrigation, and technical support needed to transform reclaimed fields into abundant harvests? That question will shape the next phase of Burkina Faso's efforts to turn military progress into lasting food security. As security gradually improved, Burkina Faso's government faced an equally important challenge. Restoring peace alone would not guarantee recovery if returning farmers lacked the resources to cultivate their land. Families needed more than safe villages. They needed seeds, fertilizer, equipment, water, and practical support to begin producing food again. This realization became the foundation of the Presidential Initiative for Agricultural and Food Production. Rather than treating agriculture as a separate policy, the initiative linked national security with economic recovery. Once communities returned to their villages, the government sought to provide the basic tools required for a successful planting season. Improved seeds, fertilizer, farming equipment, livestock support, and irrigation projects were introduced to help farmers rebuild production as quickly as possible. The objective was not only to increase harvests, but also to reduce dependence on imported food while strengthening local economies. Rice became one of the priority crops because it plays an important role in the daily diet of many families. Authorities also encouraged expanded production of maize and other staple grains, while exploring opportunities to increase domestic wheat cultivation where environmental conditions permitted. Beyond crop farming, support extended to livestock production and fisheries, recognizing that food security depends on diverse sources of nutrition rather than a single harvest. The strategy followed a logical sequence. Security forces helped stabilize communities. Families returned home. Farmers received agricultural support. fields produced food once again. Local markets became more active, creating income for producers and business opportunities for traders, transport workers, and food processors. Each successful harvest strengthened both household livelihoods and the broader national economy. The government also emphasized that food sovereignty does not mean isolating Burkina Faso from international trade. Instead, it means building enough domestic production to reduce vulnerability when global supply chains are disrupted or food prices rise unexpectedly. Greater self-reliance provides governments with more flexibility while improving resilience during future crises. Although significant challenges remain, including climate variability, financing, and infrastructure development, the initiative reflects a broader vision. Military success creates the opportunity for recovery, but agriculture creates the opportunity for lasting stability. The next question, however, is whether irrigation systems, modern equipment, and improved infrastructure can provide farmers with the productivity needed to sustain this ambitious transformation over the long term. Supplying farmers with seeds and fertilizer was an important beginning, but long-term food security depended on something even more fundamental. Crops require reliable water, productive land, and modern equipment to achieve consistent harvests. Recognizing this reality, Burkina Faso placed increasing emphasis on improving agricultural infrastructure as part of its broader recovery strategy. The objective was to help farmers produce more food while reducing the risk created by unpredictable weather. Across the Sahel region, rainfall is often irregular, making agriculture highly vulnerable to droughts. A delayed rainy season or an early end to rainfall can significantly reduce crop yields. For generations, many farmers relied almost entirely on seasonal rains, leaving entire communities exposed to climate uncertainty. Expanding irrigation systems offered a practical way to reduce that dependence and extend agricultural production beyond the traditional growing season. Government efforts therefore included rehabilitating dams, improving water reservoirs, expanding irrigation networks, and restoring canals that had fallen into disrepair. These projects aim to provide farmers with more reliable access to water, allowing them to plan cultivation with greater confidence. Better irrigation also created opportunities to grow higher value crops while increasing overall agricultural productivity. Mechanization became another important element of the strategy. Tractors, plows, and other farming equipment enable producers to prepare larger areas of land more efficiently than manual labor alone. Modern machinery also reduced the physical burden on farming families while helping them complete planting and harvesting within shorter time frames. Greater efficiency translated into stronger production potential during each agricultural season. Infrastructure investments, however, require more than construction alone. Irrigation systems need regular maintenance. Machinery must be repaired and supplied with fuel and spare parts. Farmers require technical training to operate modern equipment safely and effectively. Without these supporting systems, even well-designed projects can struggle to deliver lasting benefits. For Burkina Faso, strengthening agricultural infrastructure represented an investment in resilience rather than simply increasing production for one season. Reliable water management and improved mechanization create conditions for stable harvests over many years, even when weather conditions become more challenging. With stronger infrastructure gradually taking shape, the next priority became ensuring that farmers could fully benefit from these improvements through better access to agricultural inputs, technical knowledge, financing, and functioning markets capable of sustaining long-term rural development. Modern irrigation systems and agricultural machinery can increase production, but they cannot transform agriculture unless farmers have the resources to use them. After security conditions improved in many communities, Burkina Faso shifted its attention toward helping returning families restart their livelihoods. The goal was simple: give farmers the tools they needed to produce food again and reduce long-term dependence on humanitarian assistance. Many households returned with almost nothing. Farming tools had been lost, livestock had disappeared, and years of displacement had exhausted family savings. Even fertile land could not produce a harvest without seeds, fertilizer, and basic equipment. Recognizing these challenges, government support focused on supplying improved seeds, fertilizer, farming tools, livestock assistance, and technical guidance to help farmers prepare for the next growing season. Training became equally important. Better seeds and modern equipment can only deliver results when producers understand how to use them effectively. Farmers receive guidance on soil preparation, water management, crop cultivation, and improved farming practices designed to increase yields while protecting natural resources. These practical skills helped communities rebuild production with greater confidence. Access to finance also remained essential. Many small farmers lacked the capital to replace equipment or expand cultivation after years of conflict. Agricultural cooperatives and local support programs helped reduce costs by encouraging farmers to share machinery, purchase supplies together, and improve their ability to market their harvests. Working collectively also strengthened rural communities during the recovery process. Producing more food, however, was only part of the solution. Farmers also needed reliable transportation, storage facilities, and local markets where they could sell their crops at fair prices. Without functioning supply chains, larger harvests would not automatically translate into higher incomes or stronger food security. For Burkina Faso, success would ultimately be measured not by the amount of aid distributed, but by the number of farming families able to support themselves again. As production gradually recovered, the next stage of the national strategy focused on expanding beyond staple crops and building a more diverse agricultural system capable of strengthening food security for years to come. A nation cannot achieve lasting food security by depending on a single crop. Droughts, pests, changing market prices, or poor harvests can quickly threaten communities that rely on one source of food or income. For this reason, Burkina Faso expanded its agricultural recovery strategy beyond staple grains, encouraging a more diverse food system capable of strengthening both rural livelihoods and national resilience. Rice remained one of the country's highest priorities because it is consumed daily by millions of families. At the same time, farmers were encouraged to increase maize production and develop wheat cultivation where local conditions made it possible. Expanding these staple crops aimed to reduce dependence on imported food while improving the country's capacity to meet domestic demand through local production. The strategy also recognized that food security requires more than cereals. Livestock production plays a vital role in supplying meat, milk, and household income, particularly in rural communities. Programs supporting cattle, sheep, goats, and poultry helped many families rebuild productive assets that had been lost during years of conflict. These animals also provided an important source of financial security during difficult seasons. Fishing and aquaculture became another area of growing interest. By making better use of reservoirs and inland water resources, communities could diversify their diets while creating additional employment opportunities. Fish farming also supported local businesses involved in processing, transportation, and market distribution, generating economic activity beyond the farms themselves. Diversification offered another important advantage. When one agricultural sector experienced difficulties because of weather or disease, other sources of food and income could help reduce the overall impact on farming households. This balanced approach strengthened resilience while improving nutrition through a wider variety of locally produced foods. Burkina Faso's long-term objective was not simply to harvest larger quantities of crops, but to build a complete agricultural system capable of supporting economic growth, creating employment, and improving food availability across the country. As production expanded into multiple sectors, attention increasingly turned toward one of the most important national priorities: creating meaningful opportunities for young people, whose energy and skills would play a decisive role in securing the future of both agriculture and the nation itself. Agriculture has always depended on the strength and determination of young people. Yet, in many parts of Burkina Faso, years of conflict reduced opportunities for employment, education, and economic growth. Limited prospects left many rural communities struggling to retain their younger generations. As agricultural recovery accelerated, Creating meaningful jobs for young people became one of the government's most important long-term priorities. Modern agriculture offers far more opportunities than traditional crop cultivation alone. Every successful harvest depends on mechanics who repair tractors, technicians who maintain irrigation systems, veterinarians who care for livestock, drivers who transport goods, traders who connect producers with markets, and workers who process agricultural products. Expanding food production therefore creates employment throughout the entire agricultural value chain, not only on the farm itself. Government initiatives increasingly encourage young people to participate in farming, agribusiness, and food processing. Training programs introduce modern production techniques while helping participants develop practical business skills. Rather than viewing agriculture as low-income manual labor, these efforts promoted it as a sector capable of supporting entrepreneurship, innovation, and long-term economic growth. Stable employment also contributes to stronger communities. Young people who can earn reliable incomes are better positioned to support their families, invest in local businesses, and remain in their hometowns instead of living in search of uncertain opportunities elsewhere. Thriving rural economies encourage schools, healthcare services, transportation, and local markets to expand alongside agricultural development. While employment alone cannot solve every challenge associated with insecurity, it provides communities with greater resilience. Economic opportunity offers constructive alternatives, strengthens social stability, and helps communities recover from years of disruption. Combined with improved education, effective public services, and continued security, sustainable livelihoods can become an important part of long-term national recovery. For Burkina Faso, investing in young people means investing in the future of agriculture itself. Every new farmer, technician, entrepreneur, or food processor strengthens the country's ability to produce its own food while creating broader economic opportunities. As these efforts continue, the conversation naturally expands beyond individual harvest toward an even larger goal, building an economy where food production supports national sovereignty, economic independence, and lasting resilience for generations to come. Producing more food is an important achievement, but it is only one part of building a stronger nation. A country also benefits when it can process, store, and distribute its own agricultural products instead of relying heavily on imports. For Burkina Faso, the long-term vision extends beyond increasing harvests. It focuses on creating an agricultural economy that generates employment, adds value to local products, and strengthens national resilience. Every stage of the food supply chain creates economic opportunities. Grain must be cleaned, milled, packaged, transported, and sold. Livestock products require processing and refrigeration. Fish need storage and distribution before reaching consumers. When these activities take place inside the country, they create additional jobs while allowing more of the economic value to remain within local communities instead of flowing abroad. Storage facilities are equally important. A successful harvest can lose much of its value if crops spoil before reaching the market. Modern warehouses and grain reserves help reduce post-harvest losses while allowing governments and traders to respond more effectively during periods of drought, poor harvests, or rising food prices. Reliable storage also gives farmers greater flexibility in deciding when to sell their products. Expanding domestic processing and storage contributes to greater economic independence. Burkina Faso can continue trading with international partners while reducing its vulnerability to disruptions in global supply chains or sudden increases in import costs. Stronger local production provides governments with more choices and helps protect consumers from external shocks that are beyond national control. Regional cooperation also remains important. Neighboring countries such as Mali and Niger face many of the same agricultural and security challenges. Sharing knowledge, improving transportation links, and encouraging regional trade can strengthen food systems across the Sahel while supporting long-term economic development. For Burkina Faso, the ultimate objective is not simply producing larger harvests each year. It is creating an agricultural economy capable of supporting national prosperity, strengthening food sovereignty, and improving the lives of future generations. The final question is whether these efforts can leave a lasting legacy that extends well beyond today's challenges and shapes the country's future for decades to come. The story of Burkina Faso's agricultural recovery is still being written. Security challenges have not disappeared. Climate risks remain unpredictable, and rebuilding rural communities requires patience, investment, and continued cooperation. Yet, one lesson has become increasingly clear. Lasting national strength depends not only on defending territory, but also on giving people the opportunity to build prosperous lives on that land. The strategy pursued under Ibrahim Traore reflects this broader vision. Military operations create the conditions for stability, but farmers, workers, entrepreneurs, and local communities ultimately determine whether that stability becomes lasting progress. Every field returned to production, every irrigation project completed, every young farmer starting a business, and every local market reopening represents another step toward national recovery. Food sovereignty is not about isolating Burkina Faso from the rest of the world. It is about reducing vulnerability, strengthening domestic production, and ensuring that families can rely first on the resources and abilities of their own country. A resilient agricultural sector provides employment, supports economic growth, and gives future generations greater confidence in their nation's ability to face external challenges. The experience of Burkina Faso also carries significance beyond its own borders. Across West Africa and the wider Sahel region, countries continue searching for ways to combine security, economic development, and national sovereignty. The discussions surrounding Ibrahim Traore, Assimi Goïta, and Abdourahmane Tchiani are frequently featured in African news as governments explore different paths toward long-term stability. These debates also attract attention from the African Union, neighboring countries such as Mali and Niger, and international partners including France, all of whom recognize the importance of a stable and food-secure region. Whether every objective will be achieved remains uncertain, but the direction is unmistakable. Burkina Faso is attempting to transform military progress into economic resilience by rebuilding agriculture from the ground up. If these efforts continue to succeed, the country's greatest victory may not be remembered on the battlefield, but in the fields where families once again harvest food, earn dignified livelihoods, and shape a more secure future for generations to come. If you found this analysis valuable, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more in-depth stories exploring the future of Burkina Faso, West Africa, and the Sahel. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.